Hi everybody, my name's Teresa and this year I'm Mayor of Mould. Sadly, and you know why, I've not been able to come and see you all this year. So I thought I'd read you a little story. And it was written by a friend of mine and it's called Die Post and the Blue Shoes. And it's by Rhian, who actually comes from Mould and now works in Chester as a lecturer. I also need to say a big thank you to Theatre Clwyd for allowing me to use this absolutely gorgeous little room. It's the best place ever, and I'd like to thank my new friends Gwennan, Hannah and Serena for helping me and making it all possible. So now I shall begin. Die Post and the Blue Shoes. The valley caught the snow like an open hand. The flakes settled on the rooftops and roads, coating them in a deep white coldness. Maya, running to the door at the sound of rapping, had to do a little dance to keep her bare feet from freezing on the floor. "Hello, little Maya," Die Post tipped his cap. "Letter to your mam from your Uncle Jack here. That's nice then." "Thank you," said Maya, accepting the envelope. She didn't ask the postman how he knew who the message was from. Not many people left the valley. And Uncle Jack was the talk of the town when he went to Worcester to work in the orchards. Maya pattered back inside and used her foot to shove the rags back under the door to keep the drafts out. She hurled herself into the kitchen, skirts flying. This was the warmest place in the little house. Its stone walls and slate roof held the cold tight, even though it was cutched up to its neighbours in the terrace. Inside, the floor was made of flagstones, and the white plaster walls were scrubbed clean. The kitchen, with its big iron range, was the heart of their home. There was a bowl of cawl made from scrag end of lamb, boiling on one hob, and a pan full of white underwear steamed away on the other, while a loaf baked in the oven. "Die Post," Maya said, at her mother's raised eyebrow. "Here, Mummy." "Diolch, Maya," said Mam, taking the letter. Big brother Evan, Hazel the oldest girl, and Non, who was a year and a bit younger than Maya, all gathered round. Being 5, Non was the baby of the family, and she got the best spot, cuddled up on Mam's lap. "Evan, put your schooling to good use and read this, please," said Mam. Evan cleared his throat. "Hello to the Hugheses," he read. "I hope you are all well. I am very well myself. The harvest was rich, and I've been offered a place at the Great Gardens." Maya was a little disappointed. The Uncle Jack she remembered was a sprightly, smiling man, full of jokes. The letter was not the same. But Mam's face lit up in a broad smile, and that made her happy. Things in the house had been a little less than happy since the means test man had visited a few days ago. Maya hadn't liked him at all, with his long, unsmiling face, his scratchy pencil and his clipboard. He made a noise as he moved throughout the rooms. The tiny parlour, the kitchen pantry, the 2 bedrooms upstairs, and the box room where Evan slept. The means test man had said, and then he'd gone scribble with his pencil. Scribble. Scribble, scribble, scribble. At the end of his slow, peering nose around their home, which included a look under the beds where the chain pots waited, he turned to Mam and gave her a list, which to Maya sounded like the start of a nonsense rhyme. "You have too many chairs, the rugs on the stairs, the knives in the drawer, the knobs on the door, and all the family china." Mam had folded her lips tight, and later Maya overheard her saying to Da, "He said that there were 6 of us, but we have 7 chairs, so we have to sell one. I mean, who wants 1 chair? And the plates? They were my 9s from when the family had money. They won't give us a penny until I've pawned my wedding ring, Dick." "I don't like the mean test man," Maya declared, and that made her mother smile, sadly. That's a good name for him. Now Mam was smiling properly at Uncle Jack's letter. She took it back from Evan when he'd finished reading it out. As Christmas crept closer, became clearer each day that money was tight. Mam spent much of her time darning old socks and clothes to keep them going a little longer. And Da stopped taking the newspaper, which made Maya worry about what they would use in the tea bath. "We'll wipe our bums on dock leaves like wild men," said Evan, and he got a smack on his own bum for speaking like that in front of his little sisters. Da was back in the mines after the strike, but there was no sign of a pay packet. He got in trouble with the policeman for picking coal scraps from the spoil tip. The policeman said it was theft, even though it was waste coal that nobody wanted. And in a prideful temper, Da dumped the scraps he'd spent hours collecting on the PC's feet and snapped, "You can have the coal back, but I'm keeping the sack as it's mine, and no man can say it's not." One day Mam sent Maya, who was only 6, to walk 2 miles to the Family Support Society, all alone, to pick up a pair of shoes, as she couldn't spare the other children. Maya, who had damp socks because her soles leaked, was excited at the idea of new shoes. She wanted a soft blue pair with a shiny buckle. But when she got them home, she found that the box contained boys' boots. "Oh, they must have thought they were for Evan for school," said Mam. "We can't afford for you not to wear them." "But they don't fit," Maya wailed. "We can make do," said Mam, stroking Maya's hair soothingly. "Don't you worry." From then on, Maya wore the boys' boots with an extra pair of socks and a padding of newspaper in the toe. Then came the strangest day of Maya's young life. It started off as normal. She and her sisters walked to school over the gritty grey ice. But she had horrible lessons. Her chalk snapped while she was writing on the slate. She stabbed her finger during needlework, and all the other girls laughed at her shoes during break. "Here comes Clubfoot," teased dainty, mean Daisy Davis. And she would have said more, except Hazel came to Maya's side and gave the girl a look so stiff and hard it could have clotted cream. Maya could not wait for last bell. When they walked home, though, they turned the corner onto their street and stopped in their tracks. There were men tramping in and out of the Hughes' front door, trucking mud into the Hughes' house and carrying the Hughes' furniture away. Maya, Hazel and Non stood, hands clenched and mouths open, as the chairs, the table, the sideboard, the bed, and boxes of rattling and jingling things were all marched away. Even the rugs were rolled up and removed. From where she stood, Maya could see Mam. She looked small and bent as she perched on the doorstep. Maya waved, and Mam did something very strange. She threw her apron up over her head. "Mam," said Maya. "Mummy." With a shock, she realized her mother was crying. Her mother never cried. She was a strong woman who brought her children up to keep their backs straight, their chins up, and to speak clearly when spoken to. She lived by the same rules, and it was rare to see her upset, and even more horrible somehow that she tried to hide her tears beneath her own apron. In a trice, Hazel, Maya and Non were at Mam's side, cuddling her. "What happened?" said Hazel. "It's the bailiff," said Mam after a deep, shaky breath. "We were owing, so they took our things." "Let's go inside," said Hazel. The little house was almost bare. It felt both bigger and smaller than it should. There were shadows on the plaster walls where the paintings and sideboards used to be. "Don't worry, Mam," said Maya. "We can make do. Don't you worry." But she couldn't see how, and like her shoes, it would be more than extra socks and some newspaper to make the house fit again. That night it was especially cold. Maya lay in bed with Non curled up beside her and a hot water bottle by her feet. Hazel, in the narrower bed next to the window, had her blankets pulled right up to her chin. They didn't have a candle. Da wanted to save what they had. "Mam is really sad," said Non into the dark. As the baby of the family, she was free to say the unsayable. "Yes," said Maya, "and Da is really cross." "We should cheer them up," said Hazel. "We should be really good and do all our chores and pray for them at chapel." Will we still have Christmas, said Mum. Oh, it'll still be Christmas, said Hazel. It's still the day that Jesus was born. She means presents and decorations and dinner and things, said Maya. I know it isn't the whole point of Christmas, but it is the part that everybody enjoys, and there hasn't been much to enjoy lately. What are you saying? Oh, I don't know. It's time for sleep, said Maya. But she still lay awake for a long time, thinking. She'd been thrifty and saved all the farthings she'd earned doing odd jobs for the neighbours. There was even a penny from last Christmas that had been slipped into her stocking next to an orange. She didn't have much hope of a penny this year, let alone an orange. So all in all, she had threepence. What could she buy that would make her mother smile for just 3 pennies? An idea came to her, and she plucked the golden thought from the darkness and held it tight. She would have to ask Evan to help her, but now she had a plan. The thought kept her warm as she fell asleep. Over the last week of Advent, Maya worked in secret every spare moment she had. On top of her chores, sweeping, washing and cleaning, she collected sprigs of holly and fir to decorate the empty corners of the house. She used a scrap of cloth and her needlework skills to make a hat for when none got a dolly. She made a bookmark for Evan by drawing leaves and flowers onto a piece of stiff foolscap, and she unpicked the hem and cuffs of her best clean nightie to pull the ribbons free. She would give them to Hazel to use in her hair. But though she ran downstairs each morning to meet Di post before Mam and Da could answer the door, the letter she was waiting for never came. They spent Christmas Eve in the chapel. The lights inside made the stained glass window glow like emeralds and rubies. As they entered, the sound of strong voices singing festive hymns almost made Maya feel as though it was a normal, cosy Christmas. Mam held her hand tight as the vicar gave a sermon about sticking together through hard times. And when the congregation gathered round the nativity, she was given the tiny wooden baby Jesus to place in the manger. Maya means Mary, the vicar explained, so it ought to be you. But after all the prayers were done, they still had to go back to a cold house. When Christmas morning dawned, everyone gathered in the parlour, where they sat on kitchen stools, because the bailiffs had taken the couch. One by one they passed each other their gifts, and Evan and Hazel hugged Maya and exclaimed over the bookmark and the hair ribbon. Mam had sewn on a raggy doll, and the little hat fitted perfectly. Da gave Evan a toy soldier he'd carved from wood. But, despite their kindness to each other, it was clear that this was not a Merry Christmas. It was not that the gifts were poor, they'd all been made with love. It was that none of them could ignore how the flames burned low in the fireplace, and that the dinner was made of leftovers. Maya was worried that soon there would be no leftovers at all. The day, for all their efforts, felt dismal. Then, just as the richest families might be turning on the wireless to hear the King's speech, a technological marvel, and the Hugheses had settled into quiet sadness, there was a knock at the door. "Who's that?" said Dar, standing with a groan. His lungs, which had never been the same after he'd served in the Somme, left him breathless sometimes. Curious, everyone followed him to the door. Perhaps it was carol singers or a neighbourly well-wishers. But when Dar opened the door, there was a man standing there, alone. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Were the bailiffs back to take what little they had left? The fear made her feel sick. But then she saw it was a tired, laden figure, whose trousers and long coat were stained dark with melting snow. He put down his packages and lifted the rim of his hat, and Maya recognised his twinkling eyes. "Uncle Jack!" "Hello, Maya Bach." The next few moments were a whirl as Mam ushered her brother inside, and he shed his coat and shoes. She offered him a cup of tea, but not sherry, because they didn't have any, and he laughed and said, "Open the presents, won't you? I carried them far enough." The big box was full of apples, oranges and pears, far more than they could fit in their stockings. There was a bushel of green vegetables, a fat, round pudding stuffed with figs, and another box held a small plucked goose. There was a soft green scarf for Mam, a cherry wood pipe for Dar, a new pen for Evan, and sweets and ribbons for Hazel and Non. I couldn't find any blue shoes for you, Meyerбach, but here is a shilling for sending the letter. A letter, said Mam. Oh, yes. Maya wrote to me. Now let a man sit down. I've taken 3 trains, a bus and a tram, and that only took me to the top of the valley because the snow blocked the tracks. I had to walk the rest of the way. Uncle Jack was ushered to the stool nearest the fire, and if he noticed the absence of chairs and rugs, he didn't make any sign of it. Evan did the actual writing, said Maya brightly. Oh, she told me what to put, said Evan. You didn't ask for charity, said Dar with strained pride. It shamed him to think of his children begging. I thought a letter from Uncle Jack would make you smile, said Maya in a small voice. Mum always likes it when he writes. I had 3pence, so I bought a stamp. It's not charity, said Uncle Jack. It's sharing. She just wanted to say hello and tell me all the news and what she wanted to get you for Christmas. So I thought, why write back when I can come for a visit? Well, it's wonderful, said Mum. Wonderful. You mentioned sherry, said Jack. It just so happens I have a bottle. And so the Hugheses had a Christmas celebration after all, and the house felt warm and right for the first time in weeks. The good food gave them good heart, and they played Blind Man's Buff and What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, and Jack took out a whistle and Darbied out a rhythm on his knees, so Mam could sing and the children danced, and by nightfall they were worn out and happy. As Maya lay in bed, sleepy and satisfied, it occurred to her that the house fitted them again, not because it had been filled out with extra socks and newspaper, but because they had filled it with joy. No matter what happened, her family would stick together, and soon the snow would melt, and it would be spring.